Okay, coolsies. Ooh, computer's doing weird stuff. Okay, good evening, boys and girls, and welcome to the party. Okay, so you guys are welcome to put your microphones on, put your cameras on, do whatever you need to do because we are asking questions. So you know how the game works. You ask questions and I try to answer them, or you have things to contribute because remember, this is not a dictatorship. We're all here to learn from each other, and I'm pretty sure all of you can contribute something to whatever we want to talk about. We only covered pigs and camels this week, so if we want to ask other topics, even very off topic, you're more than welcome to. So hopefully you guys will be able to discover some new things. So who wants to take it away? Any questions? Anything to say, to share? Anything you would like
Hi,
to...
Nick, can you hear me?
Yes.
That's Willem, yeah? In Keshkura, the camels, my brother-in-law them have a farm across the road from Pan. It's called Koppies Kraal. They actually breed with camels. They actually milk camels. They have no horses on the farm because the camels and the horses don't get on. So yeah, that whole issue of the camels and the horses, totally true. And even when neighbors come visiting, their horses spook when they get near the camels.
Yeah. It's a well-known historical fact, and it was very much exploited in desert warfare. That was one of the big issues that the Crusaders had, is that a lot of the eastern tribes under what was his name, Saladin, when with the sacking of Jerusalem, the Templar cavalry had a hard time fighting against the cavalry riders because they couldn't get their horses to engage, and it was basically a one-sided fight. So there's something about the smell, and I don't know what it is. It just spooks them. They just do not like it. So if you're ever going to invade North Africa, do it with camels, not with horses.
Yeah, they also actually milk the camels, and the milk is then sold throughout South Africa. It's quite quite expensive though.
I would imagine it'd be very expensive, and also be very fatty. Like pig milk could also be is very fatty.
Yeah, but also very healthy.
Yeah, I'm actually very keen to try it. Where is this place?
Well, it's called Koppies Kraal. It's very close to the just other side of Askam, so across the road from Pan.
Okay, yeah, Koppies Kraal. I'll Google this after the class. I'll actually look it up. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Alrighty, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, if you don't come right, just let me know. I'll send you the links.
Oh yeah, no, I'm very interested. Actually, that sounds amazing. Camel milk. I did actually have camel milk in Mongolia. I forgot about it, but that's Bactrian camel. I haven't had Arabian camel. I've eaten camel in Mongolia as well. They make these patties and pies out of them. They're extremely fatty, but they are very tasty. So it's very trendy amongst the Mongolian restaurants. I actually completely forgot about that. And I had milk and cheese, but I remember it being fatty, but that was like 7 years ago. So actually just came off the top of my head. But the Arabian camel is obviously what they're farming in your neck of the woods. Cool. Anything else? Yes, Addy, you can train horses to get past the fear. You can train horses to do anything. Remember, horses is not their natural instinct to charge into a group of men holding weapons, but you can train them to do that as well. And you can train horses horses don't naturally like to jump over poles, but horses will jump over poles if you train them. So horses are wonderful creatures or miserable creatures, depending on which way you look at it. But horses, we're going to be talking about horses which are perissodactylans. They're not related to these even-toe ungulates. They're odd-toe ungulates, and we'll be doing them in about 2 weeks once we've got through the even-toe ungulates into a bit more detail. And then we'll obviously go into a bit more of the history of domestication of the horse, because a lot of people don't know about that. And we'll get into, I love doing history as well, because it's important to actually cover that in your understanding of the world. And we didn't just suddenly appear here. There's a history to everything. So, and I find it quite fascinating. Any other questions, guys?
Also, Nick, Andre in Cape Town. I'm thinking about the camels, and many of my other conversations with you is like introducing a species where myself personally, I may be wrong in this, they are not native to. I think of the wolves in Neisner, and people bringing camels into Cape Town to educate people around that. Is that ethical, with all due respect? And again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anyone or anything, but I'm just trying to as a mini-me trying to understand all this, a Kotsoki basically.
As Addy pointed out from the group chat, I don't know how we can show the group chat in the video. Addy points out that she worked with Nazwolves. I think if it's in a confined, ethical domestic environment, remember domestic doesn't necessarily mean a home, I mean talking about controlled within human boundaries. I think it's okay. I don't think it's an issue if you are allowing them to affect the ecosystem at large without actually doing a full in-depth study of its imprint. Then there's a problem. So, like for instance, there's a contentious study. Pablo Escobar, for example, introduced, I think it was Pablo Escobar, he introduced hippos into Central America.
Yes, it was.
And the hippos have taken over, have done some interesting things for the ecology in the swamps there and the rivers. And I think there's like something like a couple hundred there now, something like that. And I don't know the exact numbers, but they're breeding, and they say there's going to be quite a few thousand in the next 20 or 30 years because they're just breeding at the rate of flies and there's nothing controlling them. And however, historically, there were ecological equivalents to hippos that were hunted out, and those hippos are fulfilling the roles of the ecological equivalents now 9,000 years later after the things. And it's the same as what's been studied with people who have argued for introducing African elephants into the southern parts of Russia where it doesn't freeze over, because it would fulfill the ecological equivalent of the woolly mammoths that went extinct in those areas 4,000 years ago. So it's contentious, you know. I don't have an answer. I have my views, but whether they are 100% ethical, I don't know. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine.
Nick, honestly, if I may continue with where I've come from, I respect you and I love your comments, what you've taught us in the aspect since we started this context of these lessons and that. If I may give one more example, is of a seal that found its way into the Kierboom River in the Plettenberg area, which is actually alien there. From your experience and what I've learned from you, I would respect. Would you say it's okay for that seal to move into Kierboom and to eat away whatever it's eating away in river section?
That's completely natural. We haven't interviewed. The seal moved on of its own accord, and that's how species move. That's how camels came across from the Americas into Asia and Africa and the Middle East. They migrated of their own. A few individuals strode across, and they gradually got more comfortable, and they strolled across, and they gradually got more comfortable, and so on and so forth. And the evolution radiated in different directions, and new species formed. And that's how that happened. Remember, there's no carbon cast, box that we need to fit in. Things evolve. The Sahara Desert 4,000 years ago was predominantly grassland. Most of Botswana was swamps 40,000 years ago. Things change. So if a seal comes in on its own to Plettenberg Bay, and I mean, with this very rigid totalitarian approach to conservation that a lot of people have, it absolutely can't be here. But that's not how ecology works. Things evolve, environments change. And if it's introduced by humans, then you can argue it's an alien species. It would have never got there on its own. But if it got there on its own, without humans involving, I don't see the issue, because it happened. That's what nature is. It's a constantly shifting, changing, rupturing and breaking environment, and it's constantly reinventing itself. So it's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, but Nick, Nick, how would you know that it didn't get there by itself? How do you know? There
we go. There we have to investigate. So we have so there's an ecological study. So if they study and there's conclusive evidence it came down of its own accord, then what's the problem? Leave it be. If it wanted to be there, and chances are it won't survive and it'll die. But if it manages to survive gradually in however many thousand years time, and if other females or males arrive in the area and they're able to breed, you will have a new species evolving in the area. And that's how all species get to an area.
I had this conversation with a colleague who is very much more deep in flowers than I am. And we're talking about hybriding. And I was like, a flower crossing the line. I mean, if you go in Kirstenbosch, I've been with guides there who said that a bird could cause a hybrid, which could become alien, etc., etc. But some people are okay with this, saying that this is nature taking its course. So me as a mini-me, a Kotsoki, excuse the term, but trying to understand this from my level of understanding, is where does hybriding stop and evolution taking its place? Knowing you as an evolutionist, Nick, maybe you can help me on this.
Yeah, hybridization is one aspect of evolution. It's not a very common thing, but it does happen. For instance, our particular, and I'm going to get into this, and it's a very controversial thing. I don't care. It's proven. They've shown that the Caucasian humans, for example, have between 2 and 4%, Caucasian being white and Middle Eastern. Caucasian humans have 2 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. You don't have to like it; it's a fact. They've done the DNA tests; it's there. And with the Aborigines in South America, they've got about 4% the Denisovian DNA, and we hybridized. They hybridized with different species of humans 80, 90,000 years ago. That those other species have gone extinct. We wiped them out. And you can get hybrids in the wild. Wildflower hybrids happen all the time. I mean, the proteas are a very common example of that. You get new hybrids coming, new grass species evolve all the time. I mean, there was a new species of frog that literally appeared overnight in this Amazon basin because what happened was its offspring all had double copies of its chromosomes. So instead of having 24 chromosomes, they all had 48 chromosomes. They were unable to breed with any other frog except for their siblings, but they were able to breed and they created a new species. So you get these weird things happening. And hybridizations, if a hybrid is able to survive and through gradual natural selections, it isolates itself genetically enough from other individuals of either ancestral populations, it will become its own species given time, and it won't be able to breed. But two species that are different but close enough to breed, because the term species is a human-made concept. Species is our definition for drawing lines in the sand, but it doesn't happen in nature. There's a blurred line in an ancestry between kudu and inyala. They have a common ancestor. They're both Traglophini. And they have a common ancestor. At some point, their ancestors were so similar that they would have been able to breed, but for whatever reasons, they've separated. But at some point, there would have been a very blurry line between a kudu and a inyala. And at some point, there was a very blurry line between Homo neanderthalis and Homo sapiens, which is us. And at some point, there was a blurry line between a lilac-breasted roller and a European roller. They would have been very similar species. And birds hybridize. Cutthroat finch and what is the other finch? There's another finch. They hybridize all the time, but most of the time they're sterile, but not always sterile. And if they're not sterile, they're able to breed and possibly create a new species. And if that species is able to survive with both hybridizations in it, and it thrives in the gene pool, then you'll have a regulated species within a couple thousand years. So hybrids are one aspect of evolution. It's not the only aspect, though.
So there's no as an alien as you would in other species. Like sometimes we see species mixing with each other, and we would say that is bad for the gene pool. Like we spoke about the ducks, when at the very beginning of this, the hybrid duck mixing with the yellow duck.
Mallard.
Yeah. So if I think of that in the context of this, please explain, Nick.
However, that would never happen. Well, that not never happen, but we have facilitated. We brought those mallard ducks in. We brought them in. They would have never occurred to you if it wasn't. If it didn't come across of its own accord and gradually interbreeding, we put them on some ships and we threw them in our gardens for our entertainment, and that's how they hybridize. So we have an ethical obligation to stop that. If mallards come in of their own accord, they gradually start migrating into Africa and they start hybridizing. That's just the way nature works, you know, and you can't stop that.
So okay, so basically what you are saying is that hybridization can happen as long as it's not through human intervention.
Yeah, as long as we're not sticking our fingers into it and causing things to happen. Sorry, I'm listening to the hyenas at the moment. It's lovely. I'm getting distracted. They had a massive kill the other night, and there was a huge fight about 100 meters from my tent. And they've been fighting for about 4 nights now. Now they're alarming again or calling. So yeah, if we, and of course this is the whole thing, humans are part of nature, and it's all very gray. But if we are not sticking our fingers into it and causing the hybridizations to happen, there's nothing wrong with it. So if a species gradually migrates into an area, that's it. Like for instance, another fine example, bookmakeries have never been recorded on Tula Tula, ever. There's no record of them. There's as of 2 months now, there's a book Makiri at the guard camp. Never been recorded in this area. I mean, they might record in the area as a whole. I mean, like in the Natal area, but they've never been recorded in this reserve. They're now settling on this reserve. There's one recorded. He's a resident at the guard camp. He will start interfering with the environment here. He will start changing the ecology. What did we shoot that book Makiri? No, he's migrated in, and he came of his own accord. And that's the way things work. Things just change. Nothing is set in stone. You know, maybe the battaliers die out in this reserve and they never come back of their own accord. Because they just didn't like it here for some reason. Who knows? But yeah, this Book Makiri, he's been here for 2 months. He seems happy. Maybe he'll find a partner. Maybe he'll mate, and Book Makiris will become a standard feature on Tula Tula. But they've never been recorded here before. So
thank you, Nick.
Cool. Yeah.
Nick?
Yes.
The Samangos and the vervets in KZN are hybridizing.
Yeah.
I've actually seen photos and videos of them.
It's interesting. But the only reason why they would hybridize, or wouldn't hybridize, is just because they have different habitats. But
yeah,
they overlap each other quite happily in Isimangaliso. So yeah, if they are capable to hybridize, that's normal. Then you'll get maybe a third
it looks like they're dispersers that end up crossbreeding with either or, you know. Normally Samango dispersing seems to be crossbreeding with the vervets, but it's quite interesting that they are doing this. But nobody knows whether they're sterile or not. That's
a study. If they're sterile, it's a dead end. If they're not sterile, that's fine then. Now remember, like with female lions, ligers or whatever you want to call them.
Yes.
A lot of them are not sterile. They are fully functioning.
Yeah.
Now what would happen is that gradually, unfortunately, the males are, fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, the males are sterile, so they would never be able to produce viable offspring. However,
interesting, it's males these so far that they've seen.
Yeah. So maybe the females just terminate. Who knows? I mean, there have to be some good studies. Now, say for instance, if male lions started to breed with ligers and started to create a breeding population of 2/3 lion, 1/3 tiger, and that was a functional species, and it was self-sustaining, that would become a species. And maybe the same thing will happen with these vervets. I don't know. I suspect they'll be sterile because they're very different. They're more different than kudas and inyalas. I've been looking for any hard evidence on kudas and inyalas. There's no, as far as I can find, there's no records of them hybridizing. But there have been records of lions and leopards hybridizing. There have been records of lions and tigers hybridizing in the wild. There have been records of different species of felis hybridizing in the wild as well. So the house cats and African wildcat, for example, and house cat and Norwegian forest cats, for example. So. Yeah.
Nick, it's Michelle here. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Michelle, go first, then the next question.
Okay, no, actually, I was going to ask about crossbreeding this evening. It's funny it's come up. About domestic cats breeding with African wildcats. But my question is actually about lagomorphs. Can't pronounce that correctly. Lagomorphs. Can it happen? Has it ever happened that a indigenous scrub hare would crossbreed with a feral domestic rabbit? Have you ever heard of that?
No, it couldn't happen. They're two genetically different. There's you know, it's like trying to cross. I mean, in terms of comparison, it'd be trying to cross a rat with a squirrel. You know what I mean? They're both rodents, but they are just like, whoa, way apart.
Totally different.
Way apart. Yeah, they just. I don't even think they could even get around to mating, let alone create anything. Sheep and goats sometimes breed, but almost always terminates before they are carried to full term. Every now and again, one carries to term, but it almost always dies within a couple of days. But the overwhelming majority terminate, and rabbits and hares are just too different. Just not even.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, there we go.
That's what I thought.
Answer the next question. There was some lady asking a question.
I think it was Mo.
Mo.
It was me.
Yes, Mo.
Yeah, no, sorry, it was me, but you know what, I'm sort of getting on with age now, so I've forgotten. I got so wrapped up in Michelle's question that I don't, I can't remember what the hell I was going to.
I do that all the
How
time.
do you?
I'm only 37, so.
No, Nick, you're half my age, for God's sake. How do you know whether a creature is sterile or not? I mean, what determines that they will be sterile, and why do you say that they will be sterile?
Well,
I mean,
if they've got
how
an
do you know?
incomplete number of chromosomes. So if they have an incomplete, an uneven number, they cannot split their chromosomes evenly, and they will not be able to procreate. So ligers, I can't remember the exact numbers. So I'm going to say I'll say 47. I'm probably wrong. Let's say like a lion will have 48 chromosomes and a tiger will have 46 chromosomes. You divide that by 2, so you've got 24 and 22, 24 and 23. Together you get 47, and when that tries to split again, you've got an uneven number. You've got in layman's terms 23 and a half, and that can't breed. You need to have a complete even number of chromosomes. So that's what happens. But for some reason, with the liger, the female has an even number of chromosomes. I'm not a geneticist, so I'm not going to try to answer that. But when you have an uneven number of chromosomes, you can't breed. Simple as that. That's why a lot of humans with Down syndrome, they're actually unable to produce children. I don't know all the cases, but I know I've read a lot of cases where mostly because they're missing a chromosome, they're unable to have children. So if you are missing a chromosome, you are unable to have children. That's ignoring all the fact that you might have you might have problems with the uterus, you might have problems with the ovaries, whatever. That's a biological issue. But in terms of when you go through meiosis and mitosis and the whole thing, we're not going to do biology today. Simply put, an uneven number of chromosomes, you're not going to be able to breed. Simple as that. So then they can test that. They can do a test and they can say, yes, you're missing chromosomes. Sorry?
Okay, so that goes for donkey, zebra, and horse.
Yes. So they can breed, but they produce a sterile hybrid. They produce a mule. And that mule is sterile because he's an uneven number of chromosomes. I don't know the numbers because it's different for every species. And that's the problem. That's one of the reasons why with humans, I think chimpanzees have got 24 pairs, so 48. I think humans have got 46. Again, I stand to be corrected. So if humans and chimpanzees had to hybridize, theoretically possible. Don't think it's ever been done though. We would produce a sterile mule. Mules have reproduced too. Okay, so that's again, it might be a case where the females are not sterile, but the males are almost sterile in all hybrids. So going back to Eddie's answer here. So again, there are always exceptions in nature. But again, what I'm assuming based on my knowledge about the lions being the female ligers not being sterile, I'm assuming that the female mules wouldn't be sterile for whatever reason. And again, I'm not a geneticist, so I don't have an answer for that. So I can maybe go look it up and tell you guys next Q&A about the answer. Florence, you were answering a question about the future of some species. What about the animals you predict will be extinct in 10 to 20 years? What do we do? The simple fact is that human population is exploding, pressure on land is ever increasing, and resources are dwindling. So the only thing you can do is pump money into it. It needs to be economically viable. People are selfish. They will not save anything that they can't make money off. So the window's going nuts here. So we need to pump money into things. If we could find some benefactor to bump 100 billion rand into conservation to South Africa, it'd keep a lot of species alive. But unfortunately, money talks. So species will go extinct unless they can perform a monetary service for the human race. It's just that simple. No, conservationists, we try to do things for the good of it, but politicians are only interested in money, as are most people. They'll have mules have there we go. There's your answer. Willem has looked it up. Mules have 63 chromosomes, ligers have 38. And again, I don't know why the females, but we'll look it up. Next lesson, Q&A, I'll have an answer for you. That's my homework for the week. We still got 20 minutes, guys. So other questions? Back to camels, huge problem in Australia. They've turned feral and been killed by the hundreds. Yes, they should all be obliterated. They do not fit the local ecology. The plants do not adapt to bulk feeders. They are used to more selective feeders like kangaroos, and they do not fit in there. They are in the same way that cats are hammering birds, feral camels are hammering Australian plant species. They should be taken out. And of course, they are heavy on water resources because they fill up in water holes and they travel long distances. And their ecosystems have adapted to that. Kangaroos behave very differently, and all the Australian mammals behave very differently. Remember, as I said, Australia would have been like a weird version of Africa until 50,000 years ago, when the Aborigines arrived and wiped everything out. And it's nothing to do with the Aborigines, they're just human beings. We did the same thing in Europe. We wiped out all the European species, the Europeans. So humans just go places and wreck things. So the local ecology there is being ruined by camels, and they should all be shot. I don't care how cute they are.
Nick, this comes back to the question about elephants in Kruger and other places in South Africa and Southern Africa, because there seems to be an overpopulation to the elephants that Southern Africa withhold. And I mean, I always remember the statistic I saw as a youngster of more elephant in Kruger than in elephant in inverted commas park, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I remember Bram Malherbe, a South African conservationist, saying we should be killing some of our elephants within respect.
I understand the view for culling elephants. My view is that they should be allowing for corridors for elephant migration. And of course, it's a very difficult issue with humans. Exactly, there we go. As you said, the ancestral paths have been blocked. All the major highways in South Africa, all the ends, all based on old elephant migration routes. The paths were laid by elephants over millions of years, and humans just use those to get around. And they always led from one water hole to another water hole. So humans just use those cattle paths and as wagon paths, and they built towns at the water holes and built towns at the rivers. So, you know, all our national highways are based on that. So
we as humans
should figure out a way of creating. Sorry?
I want to know what we as humans can do for elephants.
Well, we should find a way to create corridors through, I don't know, it's like, for instance, a large number of connected, for example, I'll give you an example in KZN, some area that I'm very well affiliated with. There's absolutely no reason why you can't have a corridor. If you look at the land masses, I mean, the private and national reserves, there's no reason beyond bureaucracy and politics and land ownership. Beyond that, why you cannot have a corridor from Kruger National Park down to Isimangaliso and back. There are ample private land reserves.
Sorry to interrupt you. Where's Isimangaliso?
St. Lucia.
Where's that?
St. Lucia.
Which is KZN, basically.
Yeah. And it's Shishlu and Falozi as well. They're all got connecting private game reserves, and they've all got fences in between them. There's almost at no point you could not have a corridor connecting elephants from Kruger down to Shishlu and Falozi, Isimangaliso, and back again. There's no reason beyond bureaucracy and government controls.
Of course. In relation to what you are saying, I'm thinking as a Capetonian-born tour guide.
Yeah.
The route I know the elephants from Franschhoek to Hermanus and back.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the natural paths of the elephants.
Yeah.
You know?
There's no reason why we can't beyond human greed and bureaucracy. That's it. And all the private landowners saying, no, this is my land, I don't want to share. And that's wrong. And if you're my view, and it would never happen, but if I controlled South Africa, and the one law I could make, I would make it illegal. If you have two big five game reserves bordering each other, you cannot have fences between those two reserves. That would be my view. The carrying capacity of an 8,000 hectare reserve is bigger than the carrying capacity of two 4,000 hectare reserves together. Like, just simple number, you could fit 20 elephants on each, but you can fit 50 elephants in a total on 8,000 hectares. So, and the more space, the more you provide for elephants. So that would be my view. Every private game reserve would be legally required to draw fences with every national reserve.
Okay, and based on what you just told me now, why have other elephants not been able to be successfully reintroduced into the national park?
Because they're not adapted to that environment. A lot of them are the big boys, the big tuskers. The large elephants are small elephants, and they don't handle, the big guys don't handle those very those very forested, very lush, dense, not tropical, but very, very temperate forest environments. It's alien to them. They wouldn't know what to do with it, and they feel very out of place, and they don't handle it very well. They can feel displaced. It's the same as if I took you and I threw you into northern Mongolia, you would be like, what the hell am I doing here? And it's the same for an elephant. He doesn't quite know what he's doing. So
Eastern Cape elephants will be easier to go down there and to live down there.
Yeah. As Addie's saying, she's very affiliated with the area. Nasa elephants are more closely related to adult elephants, and you could probably populate from one reserve to the other reserve, but you couldn't take Kruger elephants down there. In the same way, you could take Norwegians and throw them into the Philippines.
Thinking of what I know. But why haven't we, as conservationists and South Africans, thought of taking the elephants, if it's one too much, in maybe the Eastern Cape or Addo, and taking them down into Knysna? But they seem to be unsuccessful. Or is it the problem with our sandbox people?
Sandbox,
I'm not really
as Eddie pointed out, they took Kruger babies out of there, and the Kruger babies are savanna elephants. They're built for that kind of environment. You cannot take a Filipino and throw him into northern Mongolia. You cannot take a Swede and throw him into the densest part of Africa. They're probably going to die, you know, if you expect them to just to live there. That's the reason why when the first colonists came through, they died in droves. You know, you think of the number of English that died when they came to Africa and the Americas. They just did not handle it. We just weren't built for that environment. We have acclimatized. I mean, myself, I'm white, but I can handle the heat. I cannot handle the cold. If I went back to Europe, I'd probably be sickly every single year. In fact, I lived in China for 5 years, and every single winter I was sick as a dog. I was hospitalized. I mean, I just did not survive. After my 5th winter, I had to come back. I just couldn't hack it anymore. And that's obviously because over 15 generations of South Africans, I think we're in 15 generations, my ancestors have survived. The ones that have survived have been the ones that have been able to handle the heat. And I'm able to handle the heat. And it's the same with the elephants.
Yeah.
So is there any documented evidence why they chose elephants from Kruger instead of
government bureaucracy? Simple as that. Government bureaucracy and some snotty idiot who's at the top who got a sinecure, a position that he didn't really work for, but he just gets put into a position to be a face. He doesn't know what he's doing. He signs a bunch of forms and they say elephant's an elephant. And remember, a lot of the old school guys don't know anything. There's a lot of this, I've seen it all mindset and conservation, and they think they know all the answers, but the people don't want to hear new ideas. They think all the old ways are right. All the old conservationists like Ron Thompson, he's convinced he's right. He's actually an idiot, but and I'm happy for him to hear that if he's watching this. You know, they all think they've heard it all. And they all know the answers, but they don't. There's a lot of new stuff that comes out, and we need to reevaluate our ideas. Imagine if I told, if we'd gone back 10,000 years ago and we told people that the world was round and that we'd be using weird devices to communicate with each other, they'd laugh us out of house and home. But we now know all these things. If we had talked about atoms 500 years ago, we would have been laughed out of the church. So new information is valid, and we need to recalibrate our thinking to new information. And a lot of conservationists are very dogmatic, like very almost church-like in their approach. That there's one way. You dare not even think of an alternative. It's only one way to approach. Like this very South African approach of hunting supports conservation, where it doesn't. Kenya's shown us wrong. I've got another comment here. Yeah, so we need to recalibrate every generation, and young blood is very important. I'm very happy to listen to a 21-year-old that's just come out of university, because he's probably got insight that I don't have because he's new, you know? And this is why, you know, as you get older, you need to be accepting of young people's information. They know things that you don't know. And when I'm 85, I'll probably be a crotchety old shit that doesn't want to know anything. But a young 21-year-old or 25-year-old straight out of university, he's going to know a ton of things I don't know. And the same thing, and that will have to be applied to conservation. Nice elephants are more closely related, blah, 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 blah. You should have seen the reaction to possible reintroduction of Cape Harris into the Knysna forest. It was a big fat no, never. There we go. Bureaucracy. People, unfortunately, humans, especially guys in top positions, are old men, a lot of times old white men, and they're very arrogant and very stubborn, and no one can teach them anything. A lot of organizations like Sandbox are very dogmatic in their approach. And they refuse to acknowledge the fact that someone younger than them could possibly know more than them. And again, I'm guilty of that as well. I've heard people younger than me, I'm like, oh, that's nonsense. And then I've been proven wrong. But pride is a, you know, to quote the 7 deadly sins, pride's a sin. I'm not a religious man by any stretch, but it's a big problem, pride, you know. Other question?
Nick,
Yes.
Nick, you were getting back as to why you didn't cope in China. I have to tell you that my grandfather came out from Ireland, and when he arrived here and just to fight the Boers in the Boer War, he said that the problem was it was so bloody hot because they all had woolen outfits.
Yeah.
So unless they were dressed in cotton and whatever it was, they weren't going to cope. But now getting on to the next thing, apparently a couple of years ago, there were some elephants brought into a boma at Isimangaliso eastern side. And they were housed there, or whatever you want to call it, for a couple of, you know, whatever, a month or a time period. The moment they released them, they just gapped it right through to the western shores and then up into the higher. They weren't going to hang around on the Isimangaliso or eastern shores near Cape Vidal at all.
Yeah, they were homesick. Simple as that, homesick. They didn't like the terrain they were put into. They never grew up there. Imagine if I took you and your whole family and I forcibly shoved you into Calcutta, you know, and so you have to live here now. That's it. And you're going to look for some ways to going back home, you know? They were just more comfortable there. And it takes time to gradually introduce a population of hyper-intelligent creatures. Chimpanzees, the same thing. Introducing chimpanzees into new areas is very challenging. Primates as well, extremely challenging for primates. Elephants are hyper-intelligent and they just don't want to just suddenly be moved places. They've got their own little world figured out for them. And impalas are dumbass. You can take him and put him anywhere and he'll be fine. You know, as long as he's got food, water, and enough, and the heat, the temperature's fine, he'll be okay. He doesn't care. But an elephant's a smart, cognizant creature, and you can't just shove him into places and expect him to handle it. He's going to want to go back home. You know, he understands the concept of home. I mean, I've seen the elephants here at Tula. They escaped a couple times initially. They wanted to go back to the Kruger. They pushed the fences down. They tried to go north, back into the Kruger, and they got herded back in. And only, I think, on the 4th try, they were finally convinced through just various methods with Lawrence Anthony to just convince them to actually stay. And then they stayed, and they're happy as pigs and shit now. But it took a long time to get them to want to stay. They just wanted to go back to the Kruger area, but they were going to be hunted there. So thankfully, he rescued them from a hunting syndicate, and they are very happy now. And I tell people, if you're in KZN, if you're in Durban, come to Tula, do a day drive. The elephant experience here is incredible. I mean, you will never, ever have an experience like this. I mean, they're amazing creatures. We've got the space for one last question, guys.
Not so much a question, Nick, but I just want to tell you a little bit about my experience. I've helped with pangolin rehab, and we have pangolins that come from Zimbabwe, for example, or from the northern part. And when we took them out feeding, all of those northern pangolins just headed north. It was like in their mental compass, they would just head out and start going north. And no matter what you did, you couldn't stop them. And some of them would cover huge distances in the time that we had them out for feeding. So it was quite amazing. And the other thing I wanted to ask you actually about the foot structure, plantigrade being for a climbing type animal, digigrade being for something that runs. But a pangolin foot, their feet they've got the pads of like an elephant really underneath their.
It's a plantigrade foot, yeah.
Plantigrade, okay.
Yeah, it's a plantigrade foot. And a plantigrade, remember, is not for a purpose, it's just the most primitive. Remember, frogs got plantigrade, reptiles have got plantigrade, and birds have got plantigrade. Dinosaurs all have plantigrade. It's the most primitive, and mammals have evolved more advanced foot structures. But the digitigrade came, then the unguligrade came later. So they're very they're just primitive. They're not for a purpose. They're more suited for climbing, whereas a digitigrade is less suited for climbing, and an unguligrade is just not for climbing at all. You can't, if you're a deer, you're not going to climb a tree. But then again, some unguligrades, like goats, they're very good at climbing cliffs. So there we go. They made a plan.
I was just wondering about the tree climbing pangolins, the other species.
It's just a plantigrade structure, and he can use his whole little hand. Guys, we've got like 30 seconds left. So we're going to wrap it up for tonight. Save questions for next time. I really enjoyed this Q&A. It was a nice little session. As always, we're welcome to chats on WhatsApp. Any questions? If you have anything to add, save them for the next Q&A. And yeah, if there's anything you want me to cover with ruminants specifically, message me and I'll get more in detail with that, because I know my classes don't cover everything. But thank you so much. It's going to run out in 20 seconds. So auf Wiedersehen, adios, arrivederci, good night. And I hope to see you guys soon. Cheerio. Bye-bye.